The rumble of thunder echoed across the desolate plains as Hannah Sullivan collapsed onto the hard, dusty road, her legs finally giving out after miles of desperate walking. Texas, 1875, was unforgiving to a young woman with nothing but the tattered dress on her back and an empty stomach that had long stopped growling. The Sullivan farm had never been prosperous. But after her mother died 3 years ago when Hannah was just 18, things had deteriorated rapidly. Her father had remarried within months, bringing home Meredith, a woman with 2 sons of her own and little patience for another mouth to feed. As crops failed and debts mounted, Hannah found herself pushed further away from the family table, her portions shrinking until they barely existed at all. "Waste of food," Meredith would mutter as she served generous helpings to her own boys. "Girl your age should have been married off already, just taking up space." Her father, once loving but now a hollow shell consumed by whiskey and failure, simply looked away. The day Hannah discovered they had locked the pantry and hidden the key was the day she knew she had to leave or die trying. She hadn't expected the journey to Willow Creek to be quite so arduous. The nearest town was supposedly only a day's walk, but without food or water, every step had become torture. Now, as the first heavy raindrops splashed onto the dirt around her, Hannah closed her eyes, wondering if this was where her story would end. The sound of hoofbeats barely registered until they were almost upon her. A horse whinnied nearby, and a deep voice called out, "Miss, are you all right?" Hannah managed to open her eyes, blinking against the rain that was now falling steadily. A tall figure had dismounted from a chestnut stallion and was approaching cautiously. His silhouette against the darkening sky was imposing broad shoulders, a Stetson pulled low, and the distinctive shape of a gun at his hip. "Can you hear me, miss?" The man crouched beside her, and Hannah caught her first glimpse of his face, rugged features framed by dark blonde hair, concerned blue eyes studying her with genuine worry. "Water," she croaked, her voice barely audible. Without hesitation, he retrieved a canteen from his saddle and returned to her side, gently lifting her head so she could drink. The cool liquid was the most wonderful thing Hannah had ever tasted, and she had to force herself not to gulp it desperately. "Easy now," he cautioned. "Too much too quick will make you sick." He studied her thin frame, the hollow cheeks, and the dark circles under her eyes. "When's the last time you ate, miss?" Hannah couldn't remember. 2 days, 3, the days had blurred together in her hunger. "I'm Nathan Blackett," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I've got a ranch about 3 miles from here. Let me take you there, get you some food and dry clothes." Hannah wanted to protest, to explain she was heading to Willow Creek to find work, but exhaustion claimed her as Nathan carefully lifted her onto his horse. The last thing she remembered was the security of his strong arms keeping her from falling as the rain continued to soak them both. When Hannah awoke, she found herself in an unfamiliar bed, wearing a clean nightgown that was several sizes too large. The room was simple but comfortable: a wooden dresser, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and sunlight streaming through curtained windows. The door opened and a gray-haired woman entered carrying a tray. "Good you're awake, Mr. Blackett will be relieved. I'm Mrs. Cooper, the housekeeper. He found you collapsed on the road yesterday." Hannah tried to sit up, but weakness overtook her. "How long have I been asleep?" "Nearly a full day and night. You were half dead from hunger and exhaustion, poor thing." Mrs. Cooper set the tray down, a bowl of broth, a small piece of bread, and tea. "Mr. Blackett said to start you with something light. Too much food when you're starved can kill you faster than the hunger itself." Hannah's hands trembled as she reached for the bread. "Mr. Blackett, he brought me here, carried you in himself, soaked to the bone from the storm, insisted I tend to you immediately while he went for the doctor." Mrs. Cooper clucked her tongue. "Doctor said you're suffering from severe malnourishment. What happened to you, child?" Hannah took a small sip of broth, savoring the warm, salty liquid. "My family, they—" She couldn't finish the sentence, shame and grief blocking the words. "There'll be time for explanations later. For now, you eat what you can and rest." Over the next 3 days, Hannah's strength gradually returned. Mrs. Cooper brought increasingly substantial meals, and Hannah learned bits about her rescuer from the housekeeper's proud chatter. Nathan Blackett, 30 years old, had inherited the modest ranch from his uncle 5 years ago and transformed it into one of the most successful operations in the county. He was respected in town, unmarried, and known for his fair dealings with both his ranch hands and business partners. On the fourth morning, Hannah felt strong enough to dress in the simple but clean dress Mrs. Cooper had provided and venture from her room. She found her way to a comfortable sitting room where Nathan was reviewing some papers at a desk. He looked up immediately, a smile warming his face. "Miss Sullivan, it's good to see you on your feet, Mr. Blackett," Hannah replied, suddenly self-conscious. "I don't know how to thank you for your kindness." "No thanks necessary," he gestured to a chair. "Please sit." "Mrs. Cooper tells me you're improving, but you shouldn't overtire yourself." Hannah sat, smoothing the unfamiliar dress. "I've imposed on your hospitality too long already. Once I'm fully recovered, I'll continue to Willow Creek as I planned." Nathan's expression turned serious. "Miss Sullivan, forgive my directness, but before you make any decisions, I'd like to understand what led to your condition. The doctor said you've been systematically undernourished for months." The kindness in his voice broke through Hannah's defenses. The story poured out her mother's death, her father's remarriage, and the gradual way her stepmother had turned her into an unwanted burden, rationing her food while her father drowned his sorrows and ignored the cruelty happening under his own roof. "The final straw was when I found they'd locked up all the food," Hannah concluded, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "I took what little money I had saved and left. I thought I could make it to Willow Creek, find work as a seamstress or housekeeper." Nathan's jaw tightened as she spoke, his hands clenching into fists before consciously relaxing them. No one deserves such treatment, especially not from their own family. "They were struggling," Hannah said, the excuse automatic after years of justifying her treatment to herself. "That's no excuse. Families share hardships, they don't cast aside their own." Nathan stood and paced to the window. "Miss Sullivan, I have a proposition for you." Hannah tensed, immediately wary. She'd heard stories of men who rescued desperate women only to exploit them. As if reading her thoughts, Nathan quickly added, "Nothing improper, I assure you. My ranch needs a proper mistress, someone to manage the household affairs, plan meals for the hands during roundup, and maintain the accounts. Mrs. Cooper is getting on in years and has been asking for help. You're offering me employment, with room and board plus a fair wage." He returned to his seat. "You'd have your own quarters in the main house, and Mrs. Cooper would remain as chaperone, of course. Your duties would increase gradually as your health improves." The offer was too good to be true. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Nathan's expression softened. "Because everyone deserves a chance, Miss Sullivan. I was once helped by a stranger when I needed it most, and I believe in passing kindness forward." Hannah considered the proposition. It seemed far better than her original plan of seeking work from strangers in Willow Creek. "I accept, Mr. Blackett, and please call me Hannah." "Hannah," he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. "Then you must call me Nathan." As spring gave way to early summer, Hannah's health and strength returned. The Blackett Ranch became her sanctuary, a place where she was valued, fed, and treated with respect. Mrs. Cooper taught her the household management, while Nathan patiently explained the financial aspects of running the ranch. Nathan's kindness never wavered. But he maintained a respectful distance that both relieved and, increasingly, disappointed Hannah. She found herself watching him as he worked with the horses or gave instructions to his men, admiring his capable hands and the quiet authority he commanded without resorting to harshness. One evening in July, as Hannah sat on the porch enjoying the cooling air after a particularly hot day, Nathan joined her, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. "Mrs. Cooper says you've mastered her secret recipe for apple pie," he commented, passing her a glass. The men were fighting over the last piece at dinner. Hannah smiled, pleased by the compliment. "She's a good teacher, though I think her secret is simply patience with the crust." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Hannah was acutely aware of Nathan beside her, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, his profile strong against the fading light. "You're different," he said suddenly. "Different from when I found you. Not just physically healthier, you smile more, laugh sometimes." Hannah considered this. "I feel safe here. I'd forgotten what that felt like." Nathan turned to look at her directly, his gaze intense. "You will always be safe here, Hannah. I want you to know that." Something in his tone made her heart quicken. "Thank you for everything." He seemed about to say more, but instead nodded and returned to watching the sunset. Hannah wondered what he'd left unsaid, and whether the flutter in her chest whenever he was near was as obvious to him as it felt to her. The next morning, Hannah was reviewing the household accounts when Nathan burst into the study, his expression grim. "Hannah, we need to talk." She set down her pencil, alarmed by his serious tone. "What's wrong?" "I've just returned from town. I heard something disturbing." He pulled a chair close to hers. "Your father and stepmother are telling people you stole money before running away. They've reported it to the sheriff." Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not true. The only money I took was what I'd earned myself sewing for neighbors." "I believe you," Nathan assured her quickly. "But they're claiming otherwise, and in a small community like this, accusations can do real damage, even without proof." "What should I do?" Hannah's mind raced. Would she be arrested, forced to return to the family that had nearly starved her to death? Nathan's expression hardened. "I have a solution, but it's unconventional. I need you to hear me out completely before you respond." Hannah nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "If you were my wife, their accusations would hold no weight. A husband has legal standing to protect his wife that an employer cannot claim for a household employee." "Your wife," Hannah repeated, certain she'd misunderstood. "In name only," Nathan clarified quickly. "A marriage of convenience. You would continue your duties as before, but with the legal protection of my name. No one could force you to return to your family. You're proposing marriage to protect me from false accusations." "Yes." His eyes held hers steadily. "You would have my promise that nothing would change between us beyond what's necessary for appearances. When sufficient time has passed and this matter is resolved, we could quietly arrange an annulment if you wish." Hannah's thoughts whirled. Marriage, even one in name only, was not something to enter lightly. Yet the alternative could mean facing her father and Meredith again, possibly even jail if their lies were believed. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course." "But not too much time. The sheriff mentioned he might ride out to have a word with you tomorrow." That night, Hannah barely slept. Nathan's proposal kept replaying in her mind, along with the memory of his face when he'd made it earnest, concerned, but with something else she couldn't quite define. Was it merely obligation? Or was there another reason he'd suggested marriage rather than simply hiring her a lawyer? By morning, she had her answer. She found Nathan in the stables, already preparing to ride into town. "I've thought about your proposal," she said without preamble. He straightened, his expression guarded. "And I accept. You've shown me nothing but kindness, and I trust your word that this arrangement will be respectful." Relief washed over his features. "Thank you for your trust, Hannah. I promise you won't regret it." "There's one condition," she added, gathering her courage. "I won't enter even a marriage of convenience with secrets between us. I need to know why you're really doing this. Is it truly just to protect me from these accusations?" Nathan hesitated, then set down the saddle he'd been holding. He approached her slowly, as if giving her time to retreat if she wished. "No," he admitted quietly. "Not entirely. The accusations gave me a reason, perhaps even an excuse, but—" He took a deep breath. "I've grown to care for you, Hannah, more than I should as your employer. I would never have spoken of it, never have pressured you, but when I heard what your family was claiming, I saw a way to protect you that also gave me hope that perhaps, in time, you might come to see me as more than your benefactor." Hannah stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You care for me, as a woman, not just as someone you rescued?" "Yes." His voice was rough with emotion. "I understand if that changes your mind about accepting my proposal. I would still help you fight these accusations. Find another way." Hannah stepped forward and placed her finger gently against his lips, silencing him. It doesn't change my mind, it settles it. She lowered her hand, suddenly shy despite her boldness. I've been fighting my feelings for you, thinking them inappropriate, one-sided. I never imagined you might feel the same. The look that transformed Nathan's face was like sunrise breaking over the plains, gradual, then suddenly brilliant. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached for her hands and drew her closer. May I kiss you, Hannah? Not as part of our arrangement, but because I've wanted to since the first time I saw you smile. In answer, Hannah rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was tender, questioning at first, then deepening as Nathan pulled her closer, one hand cupping her cheek with infinite care. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. That was not part of my proposal, he murmured. Hannah smiled, feeling happier than she had in years. Consider it my counteroffer, a real marriage, not just one of convenience. They were married that afternoon by the town's minister, with Mrs. Cooper and Nathan's foreman as witnesses. The sheriff, who'd arrived at the ranch intending to question Hannah about her family's accusations, instead offered gruff congratulations and left with a promise to set the record straight with her father. That evening, as they sat together on the porch of what was now truly their home, Hannah felt a peace she'd never known before. I have something for you, Nathan said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small paper-wrapped package. I bought this weeks ago, never imagining I'd have the chance to give it to you like this. Hannah unwrapped it carefully to find a simple silver band set with a small pearl. It's beautiful, she whispered. It was my mother's. I've carried it with me since she died, waiting for. He trailed off, then smiled. Waiting for you, I think, though I didn't know it. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Hannah felt tears welling in her eyes. From starving to this, she said softly, I keep thinking I'll wake up and find it was all a dream, not a dream. Nathan kissed her hand where the ring now rested. Though I understand the feeling. When I found you on that road, I was only trying to help someone in need. I never expected to find the person who would make my house a home. Over the next months, their marriage deepened from mutual respect and attraction into something neither had dared hope for, a true partnership built on trust, shared work, and growing love. Nathan's gentle patience helped Hannah overcome her lingering fears from her past, while her organizational skills and determination improved the ranch's operations beyond what he'd managed alone. Word eventually reached them that Hannah's father had lost the farm, and he and Meredith had moved west seeking better prospects. Hannah sent a letter offering forgiveness but received no reply. Instead of dwelling on this final rejection, she focused on building her new family. By their first anniversary, Hannah was expecting their first child, and the ranch had expanded to include new grazing lands and additional cattle. The night they celebrated the anniversary of their wedding, Nathan gave her a journal bound in soft leather. What's this for? She asked, running her fingers over the cover. Our story, he replied. For our children and grandchildren someday, I want them to know how their family began with an act of kindness that turned into the greatest blessing of my life. Hannah smiled, thinking of how far they'd come. Should I start with the storm, or with the bread you first fed me when I could barely sit up? Start with the moment I knew I loved you, Nathan suggested, pulling her close. When you insisted on helping with the spring roundup even though Mrs. Cooper said it wasn't proper for the mistress of the house, and you came home covered in dust but smiling brighter than I'd ever seen. That early, Hannah laughed. I was still so thin then. You were beautiful. Strong in a way that had nothing to do with physical strength. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You still are. 5 years later, the Blackett Ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the county. Their home had expanded to accommodate their growing family, 2 sons and a daughter, with another child on the way. The nightmare of Hannah's early life seemed distant now, like a story that had happened to someone else. One autumn evening, as the children played in the yard under Mrs. Cooper's watchful eye, Hannah found Nathan standing at the fence, looking out over their land. Penny for your thoughts, she said, slipping her arm through his. I was thinking about timing, he replied, covering her hand with his. If I'd ridden a different route that day, if the storm had held off another hour, we would have found each other somehow, Hannah said with certainty. I believe that now. Nathan turned to her, his eyes reflecting the same love she'd come to depend on. From starvation to abundance, he murmured, placing his hand gently on her rounded belly. You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible. We gave it to each other, Hannah corrected softly. Equal partners, remember? As the sun set over their land, casting long shadows across the fields they'd cultivated together, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a girl starving under her own family's roof to a woman surrounded by love and plenty, she had transformed through the simple act of being valued, being seen. The greatest gift Nathan had given her wasn't the bread that had saved her life or the name that had protected her from her past. It was the belief that she deserved nourishment, protection, and love. In return, she had given him a family and a partnership that made his success sweeter for being shared. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Nathan whispered, "Do you ever regret it?" Accepting my proposal that day, Hannah turned to face him, tracing the familiar lines of his face with her fingertips. Not for a single moment. You offered me bread when I was starving and called me your wife when I needed protection. But you gave me much more. You gave me a home where I could become myself again. And who is that? He asked, catching her hand and kissing her palm. Who is Hannah Blackett when she's not someone's daughter or wife or mother? Hannah smiled in the darkness, touched by his understanding that she needed to be seen as herself, not just through her relationships to others. She's a woman who knows her own worth now. Who understands that love shouldn't hurt or diminish. Who wants to make sure no one else ever feels as forgotten as she once did. This was why they had started taking in orphan children from town, giving them work and education until they were old enough to choose their own paths. It was why Hannah rode into neighboring farms when new babies were born, bringing food and helping hands. It was why their home was known as a place of refuge, and their table never had too few plates. I love who you've become, Nathan murmured, pulling her close. And who you've helped me become alongside you. As she drifted toward sleep in her husband's arms, Hannah thought about the stark contrast between her past and present. The family that should have nurtured her had instead nearly destroyed her. But from that darkness had come this life, imperfect at times, challenging always, but founded on the revolutionary idea that love meant making room at the table, not taking food away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: a ranch to run, children to raise, a community to support. But Hannah would face it all with the strength that comes from knowing you are truly valued, truly seen. And every piece of bread broken at their table would remind her of how far she had come, and how much sweeter life tasted when shared with those who cherished you.